I read a quote that Andrew said about finding you, and I love the fact that he said that you basically really fought to say, I really want to do this. So I'm curious, what was it about Faye that got you hooked on this script and the story?
Well, the script itself, the vision was like so clear on the page, and I read a lot of scripts. I just hadn't read anything like it before. I was floored when I read it. I had to like pause and like make myself some like tea because I was like so excited. Uh, and so, upon reading it, I was super just excited that the director clearly had just like this clear vision, and a lot of the camera work and a lot of the descriptors and stuff gave me a really clear sort of visualization of how the film could look just by reading the script, and that was really exciting. But most of all, the character of Faye for actresses just like doesn't come along all that often. So just a character that has this really wonderful just arc throughout the movie. She starts the film kind of hesitant to assert herself, more timid, and then by the end of it she's like leading this adventure. I thought that was like so cool, and I had to be a part of that, and I was dying to get to sort of portray that. And then just aspects of Faye sort of reminded me of my younger sister, actually, and so some of my performance is based on my younger sister, because if you ask Andrew and Jake, they'd probably agree that I'm pretty different from Faye in like real life. But just I had this sort of just like template that I could start with, that I had like an idea, like a visualization for Faye, and that was really exciting. And then once I talked to Andrew, I became even more and more excited, because we just vibed on, we film nerded out the entire conversation, and he gave me all these interesting sort of references that were influences for the film and stuff like that were awesome, and movies that I was a huge fan of, and I just loved talking about them with someone else who really appreciated them. So all of those things sort of made me, when I finished reading the script, I said to myself, I need to do everything in my power to make sure I get to be a part of this.
That's really cool.
Was, yeah, it.
Well, especially because he went through such a casting process, and then to find you, I mean, it just, I feel everything about your connection with Everett, the character on screen. And that was something that really interested me too. Did you two kind of talk about how they developed their relationship, their relationship, or did it just kind of develop as you shot it?
Well, something that also struck me about the script when I read it initially was that, one of my major pet peeves in film sometimes is the forced heterosexual romantic subplot. And I'm just so over it. It's so done. It's so annoying. And, when I was reading the script, I was like, okay, when are they gonna like do the thing where like they get together, like, she's pining for him the whole movie, or blah, blah, blah. And it never happened. And I was like, oh, so this is just like this really fun sort of platonic, rapport that they have. Like, I love it. And so Jake and I really, hit it off when we first met. We had a lot of time to rehearse and sort of, get to know each other, as well as get to know our characters. And I think through that, we sort of were able to, with Andrew, develop this sort of relationship and the sort of rapport that they have that was, present on the page. But I think, the effortlessness and the goofiness that I think shines through in the film a little bit is because Jake and I had all this time to prepare. And when we got on set, we really did just kind of goof around and have fun, because we'd already done all the sort of heavy lifting. I feel like, we did all the rehearsal and all the prep and all the, real like, actory sort of like work. And, we got all the sort of lines and stuff, integrated into ourselves. And so by the time we got on set, we were just having fun. And I think that really, bleeds into the film.
And that was the thing that I find that I was reading another quote that Andrew had said about him, and basically the fact that he had the stillness. And to me, that really meant that, something I was picking up on watching it. I saw it at TIFF, and it was such a standout film for me at TIFF too, that I loved their connection, but also the fact that they're such different people. And Faye really comes across as the lightning strike in the middle of his stillness almost.
Absolutely. And, I really loved that sort of, contrast, her exuberance, her optimism, her, faith, I suppose, in, finding this thing out, or the fact that she believes that it might be something interesting or this adventure. And he's, very skeptical the entire time. I loved playing on that sort of, relationship, that very, if you want to like really, simplify that like Mulder Scully sort of like thing, I think that, that was really sort of an aspect of the characters that Jake and I both loved sort of exploring and like, capitalizing on. In fact, some of my favorite scenes are those scenes of us driving in the car. We're like going back and forth and I'm just kind of like giving it to him, and I love those scenes also because they sort of illustrate Faye's like growth throughout the movie too, because she would have never said those things to ever at the start of the film. But, by the middle to end, she's, asking him why he is, using that voice for radio. And she's asking him, if he didn't, make people feel like, they were stupid sometimes, they wouldn't feel like they had, I'm kind of, calling him out more on some of his, sometimes, asshole behavior. So I don't know. I think that relationship and those scenes were some of the funnest for me to shoot and some of the funnest for, Jake and I.
That's awesome. When you finally saw the end result, I mean, what was your first impression? What's it like then seeing all this come together? Because Andrew's vision is unlike almost anything I've seen, and certainly in a long time.
Yeah, it's so I mean I didn't have like a big like huge moment where I first saw like the final sort of cut like all at once. I saw versions of it over time, and versions of scenes, and then they get stitched together. And Andrew was very awesome about sort of keeping Jake and I involved in the process of the film being made, even after we were gone, after we had done finished. And so he would send us updates and stuff like that. And I actually, ended up working in Oklahoma, Andrew's like home state, coincidentally after that. And I ended up getting to go visit him at his like editing sort of area. And I got to see a lot of footage. And every single time I would see some little tiny chunk or like snippet, I'd be like, oh my God, I can't wait to see the whole thing. And so by the time I did see the whole thing, I was like, yeah, this makes sense. All those amazing pieces, like they fit together in this wow. And I think the first time I saw that was, I believe Slam Dance. The first time I saw the version of the film that you guys know, I believe, was at Slam Dance. And I was, just as impressed, even though I'd seen all those scenes individually at some point, in the editing process.
Well, then I'm curious for you. You were talking about the fact that you and Andrew were talking about like films you loved and stuff like that. What would you say are some of your favorite kind of genre films for this type of mood, I guess?
Genre films, I mean, the sort of emotion and stuff that the film conjures for me makes me think of films that maybe necessarily wouldn't be considered sci-fi, as in like they're not like genre films like Vast. But when I look at Vast, a lot of the shots remind me of like The Lives of Others. And that movie is also a lot about listening and about hearing and about frequency and about machinery. And so that movie is something that I kind of think about a lot when I think about Vast. And then some of the movies that Andrew and I talked about that were influences for Vast in different aspects were ones that also were kind of like that. You wouldn't necessarily think. Like one was Irreversible. Andrew kind of, Andrew and I really geeked out on that movie when we had our initial Skype conversation, because I love that movie. I mean, it's hard to like love that movie, but like I love that movie. It's great, but I just don't watch it a whole lot, But he sort of, the way that the camera catches up to people and then loses them and then catches up to characters and then loses them, that. And then, Once Upon a Time in the West, he sort of referenced that, just the way the shots are composed, the big wide ones. And then one of the ones that I thought was actually most helpful for me as like an influencer, as a counterpart for Vast that I watched was All the President's Men. Because that movie is, to me, very similar to Vast. It's two sort of different people, shuffling around the whole movie, trying to find information, trying to get to this like big piece of information. And particularly the scene with, Robert Redford, where he's at the phone and he, goes, it's this one take and he goes through this journey, making these phone calls and, you're finding this information out with him and you can see his gears turning. That was a huge inspiration for Faye's scene at the switchboard, where she's kind of doing a very similar thing. She's making all these phone calls and her gears are turning and she's, putting pieces together. So those are some of the films that, I kind of think about, in comparison and with Vast, I guess, that they're not necessarily genre-y films, but they conjure sort of similar things to me that Vast does.
For sure. That's amazing. Well, I'll just wrap it up by asking what comes next for you. Is there anything that was in the can that's coming out, or what's happening for you?
So I have a film called VFW that I did with Fangoria and it came out in February, so it's on VOD, and you can see it anywhere. It's really, really fun. It's a big splatter fest. It's very different from Vast. It's super B movie, super like skanky. We got a wonderful cast. It has Stephen Lang and William Sadler and Fred Williamson, a lot of awesome veteran actors. And then I have sort of a sexy like thriller that's going to be coming out sometime this year called Exploited. And then I produced a short film recently called Trending. So I'm just trying to, stay creative while I'm, in my apartment trying to, do good for public health and everything like that. I'm trying to, maybe create some stuff and, put some things on the docket like now. So,
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time. It really was a pleasure, and the film was phenomenal. Of course,
thank you so much.